Welcome to Some Seminarians Podcast, produced by and starring the Seminarians of the Archdiocese of San Antonio. On today's topic of discussion, we're going to dive deeper into the common misconceptions regarding seminary formation, prior to entering seminary formation. Joined alongside of me, my name is Jordan Milligan, and joined alongside of me I have today Dalton Moy and Moses Castro. Thank y'all for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm definitely interested in kind of picking your brains a little bit to kind of think about some of these misconceptions that we have. You know, I'm in my 6th year of formation. Dalton, you just finished college program, things like that. And Moses as well, you're entering into theology. Yeah. So we've been in for a while.
Sure.
And it's funny to think about our time when we first entered, time BS before seminary, and then time AS after seminary. We're in seminary at the moment.
Yeah.
So as far as putting that on the table, what are some things that maybe y'all thought about or can kind of share with our listeners and viewers about misconceptions about the seminary?
I think one misconception that many people have about the seminary is we're not like lonely little hermits sitting in our corners. We definitely do have a lot of interaction, not only with each other, but for me personally, I have a lot of interaction with different parishes. My home parish and some of the parishes that I've been to for different assignments or different visits. And I've built a lot of meaningful relationships with them. So it's not as if we are just like a cloister or anything like that. We definitely are very social within our vocation, which is what we need to be if we're going to be a priest.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. You know, a lot of the times people think of, when you enter into religious life or when you enter into seminary, they think you have to kind of cut off all your ties of your old life.
Right, yeah.
And you kind of you have to rid yourself of your old ways and your old friends and your old family.
Yeah.
But that's definitely not the case. When we come to formation, when we come to seminary, you're bringing all that's who you are. Mm-hmm. Your good stuff and your bad stuff, the stuff that you need to work on.
Right.
And so you get to still make those new connections, but then also bring all of those relationships that you made in the past.
Absolutely.
It's important to think about.
Yeah, I think also too, for me, one of the misconceptions I had, and I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, but before entering seminary, I had a career for 9 years. And so very much focused on a schedule and projects and different assignments, deadlines and communication. So working with a team and an email was a big thing to communicate back and forth. And so when I was entering seminary, I thought that I wouldn't touch email again because
that's a lie.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no one told me that. But this idea of coming into seminary and all I'm going to do is just pray all day and focus on, growth and formation and not necessarily be too concerned about calendar invitations or schedules and email communications. But in that first week when I was applying to seminary, I had to follow up on so many emails about my application, the vocations office for the Archdiocese, the administration for Assumption Seminary and the process of entering and getting emails from the vocations director and all that. And I was just kind of blown away. I was like, what is going on? I thought I was going off to Mount Carmel or something and there'll be just written notes, handwritten notes or different forms of communication other than email. But it's part of being a seminarian is that growth and formation and preparation in our particular case as diocesan seminarians, preparation for the diocesan priesthood, right? To be parish pastors or administrators of a parish. That's an important aspect of our formation. And for me, I was still developing my understanding of priesthood and the role, the life of a diocesan priest. And so before I entered seminary, I was like, okay, all I'm going to do is pray all day and study. I'm not going to do anything else. But in fact, then there's a great need to grow in administrative skills.
Right. And I definitely would, attest to that. I think being able to kind of be sent off to the parish and have pastoral years or those times in the parish, you see the importance of being formed, not only as a spiritual father and a spiritual leader in the church, but as a parish administrator. Yeah. You're the one that kind of has to help sign off on the budgets and look at the finance council and approve raffles and things like that. But then also connect yourself with the greater parish, with your greater parish and the greater archdiocese as a whole.
Absolutely.
And so it's a lot of balancing back and forth between your own communication with God, that you have your own prayer life and things like that, but also with those around you. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand, kind of what Dalton, you kind of shared about the notion of network and that the misconception that we're lonely and that we're by ourselves. We have in our seminary formation a network that you're working with. So you have vocation directors, you have formators, you have your bishop, you have your spiritual director. There's people always around you accompanying you in your discernment. And so I think lots of the times people, they also think about, oh, well, if I enter seminary, I have my little cell that I enter into with my bed, my cross, and nothing else. Yeah. But then that's not necessarily the case. Like, you have a whole team, you have a whole community behind you, rallying behind you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think in our times of, difficulty of finals week or midterms, that's when fraternity and brotherhood is really tested, and you really get to see the beauty of the friendships that you made. Right. Checking in, hey, do you understand the assignment? Did you get that paper? No? Okay, good. None of us did. Yeah. So that misconception of that you have to do this vocational journey of discernment by yourself. Right. That's not the case, because you have your other brothers that you're with, but then also the formation team with you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a good point, Jordan, because I think a common misconception those might have before entering seminary is that I have to have figured out my vocation already. Yeah, I already have to know that, yes, I'm called to be a priest, and that's why I'm going to seminary. That's false, right? I mean, seminary is discernment. It's a different stage of the discernment process. And so that misconception of, I'm only going to enter seminary because I know I'm going to be a priest, right? And to your point, Jordan, this idea of, nowhere is it a young man saying, I know I'm going to be a priest, therefore I'm going to seminary so I can become a priest. It's this idea of like, I feel called to explore this more, and I'm not going to do it alone. I'm not exploring this call alone because, like you said, Jordan, we have the vocations directors, the formation advisor, the spiritual directors. There's a team of individuals representing the church, because this is a mutual discernment. We don't do it in isolation.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that's also another misconception, that you have to have figured it out on your own before entering the seminary, but that's not true. It's all about opening yourself up to the opportunity and allowing other people to discern and journey with you in that process. Yeah.
And especially because you have to be able to undergo change throughout this process as well. And if a guy is to come in saying 100% I'm going to become a priest one day, that's most likely going to cut you off from any opportunity to change. And that's not a good thing within discernment. We need to be able to understand ourselves better, because you're not going to know yourself when you come into seminary. Most likely not. Most normal people don't, at least. So you need to be able to figure out yourself and figure out how you're going to interact with others, because that has to have a good balance in order to work within a parish and work within those that you're going to minister to.
I think along the lines of kind of like what y'all are sharing is a misconception of what priesthood is and of what the church is. Yeah. I mean, I think prior to seminary, you can think of, the priesthood as a glorified vocation, as a glorified, position, people help you out, people give you gifts, and, you get taken care of by the church. But there is, goodness and glory found within the vocation of a priesthood, but it takes hard work and sacrifice.
Absolutely.
I think even within a marriage, just like a husband and wife, they work together for the sake of the other, that sacrificial love that they share. A man who is willing to enter into seminary has to enter into that dialogue, like how y'all shared, with the church and with those around him, and whether or not he feels called to discern a vocation up to priesthood.
Right. Yeah. I think another misconception possibly is that you're not busy. Like, you have a lot of free time, or you're just praying all day. That for me, I didn't have a good understanding of what the schedule of seminary was like before I entered. Yeah. And so that for me was eye-opening. And I know, Jordan, you talked about this just a little bit already, and you as well, Dalton, about your experiences out at the parish and building those relationships. We said this, we're not just locked in on campus like a cloister. Yeah. We have a lot of responsibilities. The four pillars of seminary life, spiritual dimension, human dimension, intellectual, and pastoral dimension. So the whole seminary is set up to help form young men for the vocation of priesthood, but we're looking at very specific areas, and there's tasks associated with each one of those.
Absolutely.
And so, of course, one of those is the intellectual formation. So we're full-time students.
Yeah.
We're college students, basically. And that's a big part of our life and our responsibility. But then we also can't forget about the pastoral aspect, right? And going out to the parish, I know, Jordan, you do a lot of RCIA and faith formation at parishes. So there's a lot of responsibility there too, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I think one of the things being in seminary is you learn with all of these different pillars of formation that we have, you learn how to look at your schedule as a whole and what you have and kind of prioritize, like, okay, Monday I can do this, Tuesday I can do this, Wednesday this day, Thursday this, Friday, and so on. And so you look at as a whole, what is expected of you and what is kind of, expected, and how that's going to relate into your daily life.
Right.
I mean, even guys, I think as we're full-time students, we also have days off sometimes with school, like normal college, university students. Yeah. I have Monday mornings or Wednesday mornings off. Right. Those are good times for us too, because we like a break.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that we're normal college students too, where we kind of have to budget our times and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dalton, what would you say? Is there a misconception that a man entering seminary knows how to pray perfectly?
Yes, there definitely is a misconception about that. Yeah. There is every man is going to have to go about learning how to deepen his prayer life. That goes for everyone, but especially if you're going to be going into the seminary, you are going to have a lot of distractions that you wouldn't think that you would have, and you still are a student, like we've already went over, and you're going to be dealing with different people, and sometimes you're going to want to binge Netflix rather than saying a rosary. So you definitely are going to have to figure out different times and maybe even different ways exploring that as well of how can I better give my time to God? How can I better center myself? That way I can give myself better to those that I'm serving, to those parish communities, to each person that I meet along this way. Right. Because you definitely will hold those people within your heart. Because, like I said, I've made many very meaningful relationships within my path, and I still hold them even as I'm going throughout my prayer life and all throughout the day.
Right. So what I heard you say, Dalton, is that there is a temptation to binge Netflix over praying the rosary. So are you saying that not every seminarian is a saint already and like really holy?
We are definitely not all saints.
That's why we're here. Yeah. That's why we're here, right? Misconception. All seminarians are not saints. No. Because let's talk about that, I guess. Because what are saints, right? They're individuals who keep saying yes, who keep coming back, and even after falling, they come back and say yes to the Lord. So in that sense, I think seminarians then are saints because we're certainly are striving for holiness. But I guess what I would rather say is not all seminarians are not perfect, and that would be the misconception.
We don't have it figured out.
Yeah,
no, we don't.
Just because we get to dress, we look nice in our cassocks, or things like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cassock gives us all of the knowledge in the world.
No.
By all means, I know I've encountered that with people like, you look amazing. I'm like, thank you, but I still don't know it just yet.
I'm still figuring it out.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's still in that process.
And I think that's one of the hard things, I think, is to get adjusted to and to think about, when people find out you're a seminarian and you go to the parishes, you go to places of pastoral ministry. Oh, you're the seminarian, you're the expert. And you're like,
no.
This is my first time learning RCIA, or this is, my second time teaching confirmation.
Right.
You're not necessarily the expert, but that you're in a constant disposition of learning and kind of just accepting that pressure and growing with that.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And that's also a good point to keep in mind as well. We still have that first vocation of tending to become a saint that everyone has within the church. That is not fulfilled before we move on to our ministerial vocation.
Right.
We still have that we're still striving for.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely. One thing that comes to my mind, maybe another common misconception, is that if by entering seminary we no longer desire to be fathers, to have families, right? Just because we're exploring this vocation of the priesthood doesn't mean that we cease to desire to have a wife or children, right? Because that's part of who we are. That's part of our identity as men.
Yeah.
And so that is something that's really important, that as we're journeying through seminary, we're discerning every step of the way. And in prayer and with support of our advisors and our spiritual directors, we're reflecting on that fact of like, okay, I do desire to be a priest, but I desire also to be a father. And so I think that's something that's really, really important that we remind ourselves of.
Absolutely. And that's also another thing to keep in mind as well.
And we're back.
That's also another thing to keep in mind as well. Celibacy is different from what we would see in natural anthropology. It is different, and that is why we're discerning it as well. Because I still adore the idea of having a wife and kids, but that energy that we have with our natural tendencies, that can be used and utilized in a way that we can show a deeper love for our parishes. If God willing, we are one day ordained. And that's the entire goal that we have here. And that needs to be cultivated. It's not going to happen overnight.
Sure.
I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, Moses, as far as the misconception of no longer having these desires to be a father, or to be a spouse of some sort. That was, as in my time of 6 years as a formation, that's been two topics of discussion that was brought up from a bishop and also a priest. Where in their time of discernment and in their time in seminary, they shared that they underwent a time or a moment of grieving, where they kind of had to grieve their losses of their children, of their physical children, but then also say of their physical grandkids that they would have, if they chose to discern a vocation to the married life. And I think for me, when I first heard a priest speak about that at a conference, and then later here in seminary when the bishop spoke about it, I was like, that's interesting. I did. You don't necessarily think about that, grieving the loss of a child, of grandchildren, but it is a dying of self.
Absolutely.
And I think in seminary formation, you grieve many losses.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the process of formation. It's to get yourself out of yourself and to conform yourself to Christ, to be a priest of Christ, for Christ. And so it's not necessarily about what you think priesthood is, but rather who Christ, as a true high priest, is calling you to be.
Absolutely. And that grieving does not stay. It does not persist throughout the entirety of your ministry. It is going to lead you into a moment of joy in the way that you're serving your people.
So then that aspect of family, this aspect of grieving the possibility of having children and a spouse, do we, though, the question, maybe a common misconception that people might have of a seminary life is you no longer have contact with your family, your parents or your siblings. True or false?
False. False. Big false. I know for me, speaking to that, so I'm an only child. I don't have siblings or things like that. And so telling my family that I was going to discern a vocation, that I was going to enter into seminary, my mom, immediately kind of started crying. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see you again. And I'm like, no, I'm just moving to San Antonio. Like I'll be there in San Antonio. And so a misconception is the moment you enter seminary, you're never going to be able to see your friends and family again. And I think as diocesan priests, we're blessed with that ability to be fixed to a geographic location. And I think even out in the parish, when you encounter parishioners and you tell them, oh, I'm studying to be a priest, they're like, oh, well, where are you going to get sent next? I'm like, here. As far north as Fredericksburg, as far south as Tilden, west as Del Rio, things like that. And so it's like, no, I'm studying to be a priest here for these people here.
Absolutely.
And so as diocesan priest, it's a blessing that you're able to stay still close to home, relatively close to home. But then see your family. You can go home every 2 weeks, or when we have breaks at the seminary or summer breaks, things like that.
Yeah.
You're able to still connect with them and catch up with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to note that the bishops, Archbishop Gustavo here in San Antonio and Bishop Gary and Bishop Mike, they recognize the importance of us as seminarians to maintain healthy relationships with our family. I can't tell you how many times that they've said it over and over, like on break, go be with your family. It's so critical for our success in our vocation and to be whole men, to have those relationships, those foundational relationships with our family. So to just bust that common misconception that we'll never have access or we'll never see our family again, quite the contrary. The bishops, the vocations office tell us over and over, go be with your family, maintain those relationships, because that's going to help us in our vocation.
Absolutely.
Right?
I distinctly remember when we had our family day, Archbishop looked me in the eye and he says, you better go home and see your family. I was like, okay, yes, Archbishop.
You're like, am I that bad? Am I that bad? You want to take me home?
That's funny. Another misconception that comes to my mind is that seminary costs money. Do we have to pay for room and board or education as a seminarian for the Archdiocese of San Antonio? And that answer is no, right?
Yes. In our Archdiocese, we have very generous people who give to the Archbishop's Appeal, and they pay all of our room and board and our schooling, which is a complete blessing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think here in the Archdiocese, we're able to have that because of their generosity.
Amen. Yeah.
And here at the seminary, there's other guys that they kind of have to work during the summer, where they have to figure out how are they going to pay their schooling, which is another burden to kind of think about. Yeah. In addition to discerning on whether or not God wants, you're discerning your call, and being active in the parish, you also have to find some sort of financial funds. But I think it's a blessing that we have here because of the generosity of those around us.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. It's a reflection of the beauty of our local church here in the Archdiocese of San Antonio. Certainly, it's a concrete reflection of the people of God's desire for good and holy priests, their desire to support and encourage young men to consider the vocation to priesthood and to give of their, be good stewards of their gifts, that they have financial gifts in supporting us in our journey. And like you said, Jordan, so that it gives us the freedom to focus on our studies, our spiritual growth, pastoral formation, all those different pillars that we can give ourselves fully to our formation. And so that's a great blessing. And then that being said, the people of God give that as a gift, right? So that's important. There's in a sense, there's no strings attached. So another misconception then would be, if I enter seminary, that means I have to become a priest. The misconception, because people of God are supporting me in this way, now I'm indebted to them forever and I have to become a priest. But that's not true. No. It's quite the opposite. There's this freedom of support that any seminarian discerns well, and you don't have to become a priest. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. Because if you do feel trapped, that's not going to bear fruit within your vocation anyways. So definitely, if you're in the seminary and you feel that that call is not going to be fruitful within your life, it's your duty to say, okay, I need to be mature, and I need to step back. Right. Because if you're staying and you don't think you need to be staying, you're not doing anyone any favors.
Right, absolutely.
I think what helps listeners kind of think about this notion of discernment as far as entering into seminary and being able to leave, thinking about it and holding it in light of kind of like dating. You can kind of only discern one vocation at a time. So you're either going to date, a future spouse, or you're going to date, the church, and kind of see on whether or not you're called to priesthood. Right. And so I think in seminary, it's very similar to dating, where you're kind of you're going on dates, you're getting to know what the church is like, what she has to offer to you, what you can offer to her. Right. Yeah. And you're not going to go in and say, yes, I'm going to marry you immediately, but yet you're going to spend some time in prayer and time together and think about, okay, what do you bring and what do I bring, and how can we work this together, work together and make this work? Absolutely. But the beauty in that is that any time entered into seminary, it's not a waste of time. Right. So just because you enter and you decide to leave, it doesn't mean you wasted, 5 years, 4 years, 2 years, however long you stay in seminary. you wasted that part of your life.
No.
But then yet you've grown as a man, as a man of Christ, and
Right.
in your own baptismal call, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing that comes to my mind about misconceptions is if you enter seminary, you can no longer have any hobbies or kind of things that you enjoy doing. Like you have to like leave those behind. That's not true either. Like you can maintain your hobbies and activities you like doing. Like I know a lot of the guys certainly like to play soccer or frisbee.
Yeah.
In fact, anyone who's listening or watching this podcast, this is done by seminarians,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
Jordan introed us in the beginning. This is produced by seminarians of the Archdiocese of San Antonio. We're on the podcast as the talent, if you will. And so like we're still doing this in the midst of our formation because in fact, I believe it's part of our formation. It's part of our human growth and evangelization. I mean, this is just the world in which we live in now. And so there's aspects for us to exercise our creative skills, our athletic skills, all of those things. And you don't have to like abandon your entire identity and conform only to one image of a seminarian.
Yeah.
You bring with you all the gifts that the Lord's given you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of weeks ago I shared at a discernment retreat. I said, we don't need you to fit the stereotype of a seminarian or the stereotype of a priest. We need you to be yourself and to bring all that who you are. You know, whether you like baking, whether you like to go hiking, or skydiving. Probably not the safest, but everything that's who you are, you have to offer to Christ, the church, and also your other brothers here.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we don't need cookie cutter priests because
Exactly.
that's going to get boring for the people of God.
Yes. Yeah. No, definitely. Any other things that come to mind? Some misconceptions about seminary life before?
I think we're good. I think we got it.
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah. If you guys have any misconceptions or any questions, please do. We encourage you to write them in the comment section below. And please also share this video, most especially with anybody you know who might be discerning a vocation to the priesthood or someone you've seen at your parish who you believe could be a really incredible priest. I think we've all been encouraged and invited in our vocations, and it's extremely powerful. So please encourage any young man or young woman you see to pursue their vocation and not to be afraid of it. Yeah. And share this video so that we might bust any misconceptions they have about seminary life, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we do.
We have a lot of fun as brothers, as fraternity, in growing spiritually, pastorally, intellectually, and humanly as men of God. And it's a great journey. It's a lot of fun. And if anyone out there is considering seminary, please reach out to the vocations director and have that conversation with them. And please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this video, like I said, with anybody you know who might be considering a vocation to the priesthood. Thank you so much. God bless.